Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Awesome with Cody. As usual, I'm your host, Cody, and today we are continuing June's theme of awesome comic book adaptations. Today, we are talking about Sweet Tooth, which I was supposed to talk about last week, but I didn't, so I'm talking about this week. So Sweet Tooth is a brand new show on Netflix, adapted from a book by Jeff Lemire. It's developed for television by a gentleman named Jim Mickle. Jim Mickle has done quite a few things, but one of the big driving forces behind this show, besides Jim Mickle, is Susan and Robert Downey Jr. I should say Susan Downey and Robert Downey Jr., because she's not a junior, and you don't take the junior part of the last name. Anyways, those two, as well as a bunch of other people, but those two especially, as well as Jim, who is the showrunner as well on the television program, are essentially the ones that to help bring this to the television program. So Jim has done a handful of things. So basically, his biggest things that I know him from was Hap and Leonard, which is really cool. And then one of the other ones he did, which is a movie that came out in 2019 called In the Shadow of the Moon, which is this crazy time travel type movie. It's pretty rad. So, you know, that sort of thing. And he's done other things. He did a vampire movie called Stakeland in 2010 that was actually pretty cool. Had no real big names in it. Probably Kelly McGillis was probably the biggest name in that one that I can think of. There's some other stuff he did too, but those to me, In the Shadow of the Moon and Hap and Leonard are the biggest things he has made that I know of. And I believe you can watch Stakeland on Netflix still, but I could be wrong about that. So like I said, Sweet Tooth is based on a book by a gentleman named Jeff Lemire, or Lemire. I'm not too sure how to say it. I think it's Lemire, but some people have said Lemire. I'm not too positive. I briefly spoke about him last week, and even on this past Friday's main podcast with Joe. He has done a lot of different things. Comic book wise, he has created his own stuff for Image Comics. Some of them are fantastic. I don't know, I'd say some of them. Many of them are fantastic. I have not read all of them, but I've read a lot of them. But on the big two, so DC and Marvel, he has done. He's worked on X-Men, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Old Man Logan, which was the revamp of the Mark Miller story for the new Marvel cinema, or new Marvel continuity that they ran after Secret Wars 2, I believe, was the catalyst for that one. But he and then for DC, he's worked on Superboy, Animal Man, Justice League Dark, Green Arrow. Over at Valiant, he worked on Bloodshot Reborn. Worked on Black Hammer for Dark Horse. Who else has he or what other projects has he worked on? He's done a lot of stuff. Let's see, Vertigo stuff, which is where Sweet Tooth came from. The Nobody, which was a book he did. He wrote and he drew. He does that a lot, actually, including Sweet Tooth. He's done those. He did art in that as well. He worked on a book with Scott Snyder called Afterlife. Is it 80 Afterlife or Life? I think it's 80 Afterlife. But for DC, like I said, he's done a lot of things. He worked on a book called for the Atom. He did a Flashpoint book, Jonah Hex, Animal Man, Justice League Dark, like I said, regular Justice League, Green Arrow, Constantine. There's a Superman book in there. There's a Batman book in there. He's done a bunch of different stuff. Marvel, like I said, he's all over the place. Hawkeye, X-Men, Old Man Logan, Moon Knight, He's worked with Charles Soule on The Death of X, Thanos book in Humans vs. X-Men. For Image, some of my favorites would be Descender and Ascender. He did A.D. After Death. That was the book I was trying to think of. It's called A.D. After Death. It was Scott Snyder. Let's see. Gideon Falls, which is a fantastic horror book that I believe is about to wrap up this year with all of them. And he's done Family Tree, which is really good, with Phil Hester. And let's see, what else? Dark Horse, like I said, he did Black Hammer, a lot of Black Hammer stuff. Berserker Unbound, that he did with Mike Donato too. That was a good one. He's done a lot of things. It's Jeff Lemire has done a ton of stuff. Adaptation wise, really, as far as I know, some of the only stuff I think Sweet Tooth is the only direct adaptation of his work that has been made. I can't think of anything else I know of, and I didn't really look it up for that kind of stuff. But I know he's done a lot of different projects. I'm sure there's, especially after the success of Sweet Tooth, I think is successful. I could be wrong about that. I was wrong about Jupiter's Legacy. I think there's a lot. There's some stuff's going to get tapped into, and if I was a betting man, something like Ascender and Descender would be pretty good. But I do believe Essex County would be a real good one if they want something horror based. You could do that one. I don't know. I read an article a while back when they first were talking about the Moon Knight show on Disney Plus, and I could have swore his name was thrown in as one of the many story arcs they're pulling from, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not too sure, but it's good stuff. Jeff Lemire's pretty awesome. Sweet Tooth. So for the folks who haven't watched it yet, and I'm not gonna say that I know. I haven't watched all of it. Well, I'll be honest. I've watched one episode, and I thought it was really good. And I refreshed myself by reading some of the books again, mainly because I was confused on age-wise of where he was at, and I'm not gonna delve too far into that because it's not very important. But he's younger in the show than he is in the books. In the book, I believe he's like a teenager. I can't remember if... I don't think it specifies an exact age. Well, in the show, he's either 10 or 11, if I'm not mistaken. But in the books, I want to say he's like 14 or 15, but I could be wrong about that. There's a lot of... the biggest thing is the tone of the show versus the tone of the book. The book is much more of a horror story. The show is way more fairy tale. And oddly enough, what's funny about it is, to me, it feels very much in the same fairy tale type world that one of my favorite shows of all time that got cut short, Pushing Daisies, was like, where it's this fantastical world, and that's what it feels like. The book is definitely horror based, but not like slasher horror, but more like, I mean, you could say fantasy horror, but it's definitely the horror of man, and how terrible human beings are, just in general, to each other, things like that. The what's crazy about it too, if you guys haven't watched the show yet, it's fantastic. Like I said earlier, it took me. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say this. It took me a long time to finally look up who the narrator of the show was because I could not pinpoint the voice. I knew it, I just could not figure out who it was, and it's James Brolin. And I was like, man, once I looked it up, I was like, oh, yeah, that's I'm never gonna not hear his voice now and see his face. But yeah, he's fantastic in everything he's done, but he's got a really good narration voice, and he does a really good job with this here show. So, and there's a lot of differences. Like I said, well, not a lot of differences. There are quite a few differences in the show versus the comic book. Some of them, I think, are red herrings. And if you read the comics and you've watched the first season of the show, I don't think you understand that. And I don't want to spoil anything too much, but some of the characters are not who they seem who you think they are. I don't know. If it were me, I would have done the show verbatim to the book because I like that horror element, but I know they're trying to go more of like a pseudo, not kid friendly, but like a little more family friendly with it. I mean, there is death and stuff in it, but there's no gratuitous violence. When people get shot, you don't see blood and splatter. They just kind of drop, kind of thing. Wishing for a movie, they would get a PG-13 versus an R because there's no human-on-human visual violence. And you see that in the first episode. Again, I've only watched the first episode, so that's all I have a reference for. But you see that when two of the lost men show up and they hunt Gus. And spoiler alert, Jeopard, I can't talk at all. Jeopard shows up and he shoots them, but you don't see blood splatter or like anything like that. It's just they get hit and they fall and they are dead. But you don't really see bodies and things like that, so that's why they get away from it. But it's fantastic, and it's a beautifully shot show, amazingly acted. The kid who plays Gus or Sweet Tooth in this is fantastic. The prosthetics / CG, I'm not too sure because I haven't looked up how they made it yet. That they do for his ears and antlers, they do a really good job, and I think it has to do with his age too. Is the way they do his hair in the show. They make it shaggier, so you can hide the antlers not coming directly out of his skin, and you can't see his ears attached to his head. You just see that there's shaggy hair in front of it, and that just gives you the look and feel of a more natural thing versus human beings with that kind of thing. Other parts of the show that are just really the tone and the characters are the biggest change, but it's really good. The everything about it is fantastic. There's no real drawback to it. There's little differences that happen that I don't think really takes too much away from the enjoyment of either one. Just know that there's a real big difference when it comes to some of the characters. If you do go forward and read the comic book versus the show, you may be confused about characterization, but I think going forward, there's time to explore it, and I'm talking about Jeopard, his character, the character of oh my God, what is his name? Holy Jesus, General Abbott. I can't think of his name. His character is way more despicable in the book than it is in the show, but he's still not saying he's a nice guy in the show. He's a scumbag as well. But Jeopard is a big change. Even Pooba, who is the father figure played by Will Forte in the show, he's a different. He's differently characterized, drastically differently characterized in the book than he is in the show. But I do love what they did with him, and I kind of like that better. And there's two. So here's the biggest thing, and this will be the last point before I wrap this up. The difference in those characters are this: in the show, Will Forte's Pooba is more loving. He's more caring. He is. He's definitely scared of the outside world and the people out there. He's resourceful. He is overly protective for sure. In the best way possible, not the damning way. The comic book, he's a religious zealot. He's insane, mentally abusive, slightly physically abusive, but massively mentally abusive. And both of them leave Gus unprepared in different ways. One way in the show, so far, again, I haven't seen the whole thing, but, like I said, the first episode. And again, I'm going by what I've read about the show, when I say about the characters, because I haven't finished the show, because I've only watched one episode. I just know what people have been saying about them. But the unpreparedness comes from, in the show, he's prepared in survival and things like that, but he's a little naive when it comes to, and due to age, not just how he was raised, or was as I raised, but the fact that he's younger and his father didn't explain everything to him in the right way. He explained a lot of the stuff to him, but not everything to him, so that's kind of shitty. And in the show, or in the book, he doesn't know about the outside world, and there's a point when the outside world crashes down on both of them, in the show and in the book. That is very, very similar. The difference is the aftermath of it, and things like that. So anyhow, enough rambling about that. Excellent show so far with one episode. I know a lot of people have been digging it quite a bit, and if I'm not mistaken, it for like a good long while it had a really high score on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that I ever take that into consideration, but that's pretty impressive. But everybody in it is fantastic. I really like, I think it's Nonzo and Nazi, I think is how you say his name. He plays Tommy Jeopard in this. Slightly different character, because in the book he's a hockey player, and this one he's a football player. One he's Canadian, the other one he's American. He has been in a lot of different things. He was in Game of Thrones. He was in Rock and Rolla. Fantastic in that. He was in Ender's Game. He has been in oh god, there's another really big one. Well, he was in The Grey with Liam Neeson. There was another really good one he was in. Now I can't think of what it is. Oh, he was in Conan the Barbarian. That was a good one. I talked about him then too. But anyways, he's fantastic. I like his, well, so far his characterization, and from what I've heard from other people, and their like discrepancies between the comic book and the show. He is different, but I do like the way they introduced him in a way, only because I knew who he was in the trailers, and then when I watched the first episode, you see him during the setup of the show, the intro area, not like the intro of the show every time you see him there, but the intro into the world we're living in and the disease that takes people out and the hybrid babies. You see a television with a commercial or highlights from football, and you see that they announce Tommy Jeopard as being a football player. And you see him on the screen, and then later on you see him again at the end of the episode, and you're like, oh shit, if I was paying attention, I would have seen that guy was on the football screen earlier, and he's awesome. So I knew that. So when I saw it in the beginning of the episode, I was like, oh shit, that's a cool way of introducing him, versus exposition and then later Gus. I mean, he's going to eventually tell Gus probably who he is, but it's done differently than I would have imagined. But anyways, he's awesome. The show's awesome. The kid who plays Christian Convery, I don't know how to say his name, plays Gus, is fantastic. Will Forte, amazing. The dude that plays Dr. Singh, Adil Akatar, and what I saw, I probably ruined his name. What I saw of him in the first episode, which is another characterization that's different than what it was, and when he was introduced also in the books. But I think there's again, I haven't seen the whole show, so can't really say this is just my opinion or what's going to happen. But it looks like they're going to humanize him faster or moralize him faster. I can't really say. So in the biggest thing in this is he is introduced during the fall of man, the collapse, I believe, is that's Biomutant, or is that this one, the burning? I can't remember how they called it in the show. But anyways, he is he's the forefront. He's there when the disease takes a hold. His wife gets inflicted by it, and I'm gonna guess he gets, because he was also the first one to witness the mutations, the hybrid babies. So I'm gonna guess he is gonna get kind of shoved into the experiments on the hybrids to try to find a cure for the disease, because his wife does have it. And that's kind of where you pick up in the book versus in the show, because in the show you start to see him right away, because even the narration says this story is about two different people. You have Gus / Sweet Tooth, and you have Dr. Singh, and Dr. Singh is very important, and he is. But they do it differently in the book because he's not introduced until later, and he's a scumbag in the book. And again, I've only seen one episode, so in the 10-11 years that passed since the beginning of the episode and the end of the first episode, he could have been morally disrupted, more so than what I would have imagined, that the way he was doing it. But I mean, because it could be that his wife falls into a coma and he's basically racing against the clock to keep her alive. But I can't imagine she is alive after 11 years, but maybe I'm wrong. It just doesn't seem right, because like everyone else dies fairly quickly. I mean, it's same as like his father, or Puba. I mean, it's so ridiculous today. And so that's a big difference. But anyways, check it out. Again, this isn't sponsored by anybody, but if you like to read the comic books and you have Amazon, there's a thing called Comixology Unlimited. Comixology is owned by Amazon. For $5.99 a month, you can read a bunch of comics on there, and Sweet Tooth is on there. I don't know how much of it is on there. I only went through the first story arc to refresh myself, because I knew the show wouldn't go much further past that. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I think it's enough to cover it. But yeah, that's about it for this week's episode. Tune in next week when I talk about Robert Kirkman and his many adaptations on TV, but two that are currently running and doing extremely well. And we'll go from there. But that's it for this week's episode of The Awesome C.O.D.Y. Again, I have been your host, Cody, and I always say at the end of these episodes, let's be awesome.